Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her, but I did. I went up to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when he stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet and, taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. "We're getting off," he insisted. "I want you to meet my girl." I think he tanked up a good deal at luncheon, and his determination to have my company bordered on violence. The superstitious assumption was that on Sunday afternoon I had nothing better to do. I followed him over a low whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road under Dr. Eckelberg's persistent stare. The only building in sight was a small block of yellow brick sitting on the edge of the wasteland, a sort of compact mainstream ministering to it, and contiguous to absolutely nothing. One of the 3 shops it contained was for rent, and another was an all-night restaurant, approached by a trail of ashes. The third was a garage. Repairs. George B. Wilson. Cars bought and sold. And I followed Tom inside. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was the dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in a dim corner. It had occurred to me that the shadow of a garage must be a blind, and that sumptuous and romantic apartments were concealed overhead, where the proprietor himself appeared in the door of an office, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He was a blond, spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. "Hello, Wilson, old man," said Tom, slapping him jovially on the shoulder. "How's business?" "I can't complain," answered Wilson unconvincingly. "When are you going to sell me that car?" "Next week. I've got my man working on it now." "Works pretty slow, doesn't he? Works pretty slow, don't he?" "No, he doesn't," said Tom coldly. "And if you feel that way about it, maybe I'd better sell it somewhere else after all." "I don't mean that," explained Wilson quickly. "I just meant—" His voice faded off, and Tom glanced impatiently around the garage. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, and in a moment the thickish figure of a woman blocked out the light from the office door. She was in her middle 30s, and fairly stout, faintly stout, but she carried her flesh sensuously as some woman can. Her face, above a spotted dress of dark blue crepe de chine, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediate perceptible... Fuck's sake. This is why I'm doing this. But there was an immediate perceptible vitality about her, as if the nerves of her body were continually smouldering. She smiled slowly, and, walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, "Oh, is this the mistress?" shook hands with Tom, looking him flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips. "This is the mistress." Then she wet her lips, and without turning around spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. "Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down?" "Oh, sure," agreed Wilson hurriedly, and went towards the little office, mingling immediately with the cement colour of the walls. A white ash and dust veiled his dark suit and his pale hair, as it veiled everything in the vicinity, except his wife, who moved close to Tom. "I want to see you," said Tom intently. "Get on the next train." "All right. I'll meet you by the new stand on the lower level." She nodded and moved away from him just as George Wilson emerged with 2 chairs from his office door. We waited for her down the road and out of sight. It was a few days before the 4th of July, and a grey, scrawny Italian child was setting torpedoes in a row along the railroad track. "Terrible place, isn't it?" said Tom, exchanging a frown with Dr. Eckelberg. "Awful. It does her good to get away." "Doesn't her husband object? Wilson? He thinks she goes to see her sister in New York. He's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive." So Tom Buchanan and his girl and I went up together to New York, or not quite together, for Miss Wilson sat discreetly in another car. Tom deferred that much to the sensibilities of those East Eggers who might be on the train. She had changed her dress to a brown-figured muslin, which stretched tight over her rather wide hips as Tom helped her to the platform in New York. At the newsstand she brought a copy of Town Tattle and a moving picture magazine, and in the station drugstore, some cold cream and a small flask of perfume. Upstairs, in the solemn, echoing drive, she let 4 taxicabs drive away before she selected a new one, lavender-coloured with grey upholstery, and in this we slid out from the mass of station into the glowing sunlight. But immediately she turned sharply from the window and, leaning forward, tapped on the front glass. "I want to get one of those dogs," she said earnestly. "I want to get one for the apartment. They're nice to have, a dog." We backed up to an old grey man who bore an absurd resemblance to John D. Rockefeller. In a basket swung from his neck cowered a dozen very recent puppies of an indeterminate breed. "What kind are they?" asked Miss Wilson eagerly as he came to the taxi window. "All kinds. What kind do you want, lady?" "I'd like to get one of those police dogs. I suppose you don't got that kind?" The man peered doubtfully into the basket, plunged in his hand and drew one up, wriggling, by the back of its neck. "That's no police dog," said Tom. "No, it's not exactly a police dog," said the man with disappointment in his voice. "It's more of an Airedale." He passed his hand over the brown wash rag of the back. "Look at that coat. Some coat. That's a dog that'll never bother you with catching cold." "I think it's cute," said Miss Wilson enthusiastically. "How much is it?" "That dog?" He looked at it admiringly. "That dog will cost you $10. The Airedale, undoubtedly there was an Airedale concerned in it somewhere, though its feet were startlingly white, changed hands and settled down on Miss Wilson's lap, where she fondled the weatherproof coat with rapture. "Is it a boy or a girl?" she asked delicately. "That dog? That dog's a boy. It's a bitch," said Tom decisively. "Here's your money. Go and buy 10 more dogs with it." We drove over to Fifth Avenue, warm and soft, almost pastoral, on the summer Sunday afternoon. I wouldn't have been surprised to see a great flock of white sheep turn the corner. "Hold on," I said. "I have to leave you here." "No, you don't," interposed Tom quickly. "Myrtle will be hurt if you don't come up to the apartment. Won't you, Myrtle?" "Come on," she urged. "I'll telephone my sister Catherine. She's said to be very beautiful by people who ought to know." "Well, I'd like to, but—" We went on, cutting back again over the park towards West Hundreds. At 158th Street, the cabin stopped at one slice in a long white cake of apartment houses. Ooh, that is a lovely description. Throwing a regal, homecoming glance around the neighbourhood, Miss Wilson gathered up her dog and her other purchases and went hauntily in. "I'm going to have the McKees come up," she announced as we rose in the elevator. "And of course, I got to call up my sister too." The apartment was on the top floor, a small living room, a small dining room, a small bedroom, and a bath. The living room was crowded to the doors with a set of tapestried furniture entirely too large for it, so that to move about was to stumble continually over scenes of ladies swinging in the gardens of Versailles. The only picture was an over-enlarged photograph, apparently a hen sitting on a blurred rock. Looking from a distance, however, the hen resolves itself into a bonnet, and the countenance of a stout old lady beamed down into the room. Several old copies of Town Tattle lay on the table, together with a copy of Simon Called Peter and some of the small scandal magazines of Broadway. Miss Wilson was first concerned with the dog. A reluctant elevator boy went for a box full of straw and some milk, to which he added his own initiative a tin of large, hard dog biscuits, one of which decomposed apathetically in the saucer of milk all afternoon. Meanwhile, Tom brought out a bottle of whiskey from a locked bureau door. Great Gatsby, in case you're wondering. That is, I have like a mild speech impediment. I have a mild speech impediment because one of my teeth is fake. I knocked out like a few years back skateboarding. And I've got a bit of for fuck's sake, I always have a bit of a slight stammer if I'm reading out loud or talking to people. So I figured this is maybe good. I don't know. Hopefully it does something.